This show is sponsored by Betterhelp Online Therapy. Relationships are hard, especially the most important one, the relationship you have with yourself. Visit betterhelp.com/super and see if how you treat yourself could use some work. Today's episode will contain spoilers for Doctor Strange: The Multiverse of Madness. Hey, brother! Man, oh man, aka MOM, aka The Multiverse of Madness. Am I right? This movie was straight up bonkers and brought so many new questions right up to the surface. We are introduced to the concept of dream walking, met America Chavez, and the idea of universe hopping powers. We also got to visit different dimensions, some of which were paint. We also got a glimpse at the Illuminati, which might be some idea of what to expect from the MCU moving down the line. But as ever, new information also usually introduces new questions. For example, when Wanda is dreamwalking into the different version of herself in a different dimension, is that Wanda still currently living inside of the Hex? And for that matter, where was Vision in all of this? I really kept expecting him to show up somewhere. Then we also had the Illuminati, which were ridiculously cool, but then also promptly and aggressively killed. Does that just go down in history as a little bit of fan service, or is this what we might be able to expect going forth in the MCU? And then finally, we get to see just how powerful Wanda is, but then end the movie with her supposedly dying. Is she gone for good? There is so much to unpack, so let's not waste any time and dive on in.
Previously on WandaVision.
Guys, before we dive on in, we need to give a huge thank you to today's sponsor, Betterhelp. Let's face it, life can be just a little bit overwhelming, and most of us are going through life possibly burnt out without even knowing it. If you are ever unmotivated, helpless, detached, or fatigued, it might be the case that you are burned out. I know that there have been many moments in my life where I have just had to take my foot off of the gas and just take a step back. Literally just working too hard and not taking enough time for myself. And that makes a lot of sense. I'm a brand new parent and trying to run multiple businesses and have friendships and time with family. They're all things that I absolutely love, but it doesn't mean that they can't also be overwhelming. There are so many different ways that life can just simply wear you out. And one of the ways to help with that or figure out where the stress is coming from is through therapy. I've personally used BetterHelp myself, and the flexibility and ability to just hop onto a video call with your therapist is really great. But if you don't want to see anybody else on camera, they do have other options, including voice call or text-based communication. It's more affordable than in-person therapy, and you can be matched with your therapist in under 48 hours. And SuperCarlinBrothers viewers can get 10% off their first month when you head on over to betterhelp.com/super. That's betterhelp.com/super for 10% off your first month. One last time, betterhelp.com/super, link in the description down below. Okay, so one of the biggest questions that we had walking out of the movie theater had to do with when Wanda is dreamwalking into a different dimension. With the curiosity being here, like, does there just exist another dimension somewhere where Wanda actually does, in fact, have this dream life, or is the Wanda that she's tapping into just also still living inside of the Hex at Westview? Because inside of this world, we get to see exactly what Wanda has always wanted, the thing that she is willing to give anything for, and what really drives the entire plot of the movie forward. Everything that she is doing is so that she gets to live this life, a life where she has ready access to her two sons, Billy and Tommy. The first tip-off that this could just be a Hex inside of a different dimension is the fact that the layout of the house is the exact same layout as the one we saw in the Modern Family episode of WandaVision. It's the same staircase, the same bedroom, the same house. It is notable that Vision doesn't seem to be present in this world, but we'll circle back to that in just a minute and start with the twins. Immediately, one of the things that stood out to me was just how sickly sweet Billy and Tommy were as children. So much so that this was actually something that I felt like I would have criticized the movie for doing. Like, they don't need to be over the top idealistic in order for us to understand why Wanda would want this life with her children. We don't need to see two kids arguing over who gets to sing the ice cream song. The point is, maybe the reason that it feels unrealistic is because they're not real. This is what first led me down the path that almost certainly what we are witnessing is Wanda's life inside of another Hex, because not only is everything like honky-dory in this world, it's almost excessively so. Basically, it becomes an overly idealized life, which I can actually sort of understand why they might illustrate it this particular way. This is probably how many of us envision our hopes and dreams in the future if they were to come true. We see these perfect ideas of what it might look like, but the thing is that most of us out here in the real world are not capable of creating an entire torture chamber of a town for people to live in order to enact this vision. Because when it really does come down to it, what is the hex if not exactly that, a fully realized version of her hopes and dreams? But the other thing that kind of trips me up, even outside of this particular line of thinking, is why the characters of Billy and Tommy would exist in this dimension at all. Doctor Strange even says it himself, these two characters don't even exist except for inside of the hex at Westview. And even if Wanda was doing things naturally, they still couldn't exist. The Billy and Tommy that we've seen before are not like biological beings. Even if we want to touch on missing Vision for a second, the fact that he's not there doesn't actually disrupt anything in the equation at all to begin with, because, not to get too technical here, but Wanda and Vision can't have kids together. He may have been there last time, but he didn't really play a role in anything. And yet we are seeing them exist inside of another universe. How is that even possible? I mean, to be fair, in the vast calculus of the multiverse, I suppose anything is possible. But if all things are possible, then the thing that I think is more likely is that other hexes exist. Especially when you consider that one of the things that we saw inside of the movie is that certain tropes with particular characters are almost inevitable. For example, no matter what universe they go to, Doctor Strange is always in love with Christine and their relationship always fails. She even always says the line, "You had to be the one holding the knife." A line that I almost even feel like the movie went out of its way to include when Strange goes to Christine's wedding in our universe. Beyond that, in each universe, Thanos' attack seems, what's the word again?
Inevitable.
The Steve Rogers catchphrase, "I can do this all day," is picked up by Captain Carter, who is playing that role in her universe. These consistencies all suggest to me that the thing that is so very consistent with Wanda in particular is the hex. Meaning Wanda will follow the same series of steps no matter what universe she's in. One question we did run into though is then, how come that Wanda from that universe was no match for our Wanda? And I actually think there's a great explanation for that as well, and it has to do with one of these multiverse buzzwords that has been floating around, which is a Nexus being. A Nexus being is a unique being within the multiverse. America Chavez is a Nexus being. There is only one of her. With the distinction here being the idea that our Wanda is the one who assumes the identity of Scarlet Witch. Scarlet Witch is a Nexus being. Wanda is not. Meaning our Wanda is the most powerful Wanda because she is the only Scarlet Witch. With that, the idea here is that there are plenty of different versions of Wanda. The Scarlet Witch persona is specific to our Wanda. There's only one. The other big question that we have though with this other version of Wanda is, why isn't Vision there to help her? Where is he? And I actually think we have a really good explanation built right into the movie. When Doctor Strange arrives at the Illuminati, he is escorted to the interrogation room or whatever that place was, specifically by Ultron bots. This is a particularly important detail when we consider how Vision came to exist in our universe in the first place. If you will recall, Ultron was a failed experiment that ultimately became an Avengers level threat, basically determined to wipe out the entire human population. Vision is then created as the answer to that threat. However, in this universe, if Ultron was just done correctly from the start, then maybe there was no need to create a Vision. The point is, my belief here is that Vision doesn't exist inside of this universe at all, which you might be thinking, well, then doesn't that kind of hurt the Hex argument, considering the fact that Wanda makes it in the wake of mourning Vision's death? But also bear in mind, the rest of Wanda's life prior to that has not exactly been sunshine and rainbows either. She still does have the powers, meaning she was still probably tested on by Hydra. She still lost her brother and her parents, and Thanos still attacks, so on the Hex goes. There's even a moment towards the end where it looks like other Wanda kind of understands what happened to our Wanda and says the phrase, "They will be taken care of." That moment reminds me a lot of the moment when our Wanda exits the Hex and drops the act for a second. In that moment, she is completely aware of everything going on around her. But okay, so what? What difference does it make if the Hex was in effect inside of a different universe? Well, the difference is that it means that other Wanda is also probably aware of the fact that outside of her Hex are campers who are not particularly pleased with the fact that she has taken over an entire town. On top of that, other Wanda is now probably very much wanted for the crime of, you know, single-handedly destroying the Illuminati. I mean, she literally, like, cuts Reed Richards to ribbons and his head explodes. Which, by the way, let's just talk about the Illuminati for just a second and what their appearance seemed to mean. My personal knee-jerk reaction here is that I could see this going one of two ways. Either we got a just sheer bucket load of fan service in the form of, hey, you know all those characters you've been asking for forever and ever and ever? Here they are! And then we promptly killed them. Now, please stop asking for John Krasinski. Thank you. But here's the thing. If that's the case, it's not fan service at all. It's just kind of mean. Fans have literally been calling for and begging for John Krasinski to play the character of Reed Richards for years. And it was like, oh my gosh, they did it. If he's not going to resume the role, then basically what they did was just a huge slap in the face to everybody who was asking for this very thing. Here's how much we care about your opinion. Because here's the thing, they didn't even have to cast him for this role. Every single other member of the Illuminati is a character who has either played that role or appeared in a different version of either the MCU or Fox Marvel universe. And when it comes to Reed Richards, there are 2 other versions of this character that they could have cast. But you know what? They didn't. On top of that, every other likeness of every character is played by the same actor. Every Wanda is played by Elizabeth Olsen. Every Doctor Strange is played by Benedict Cumberbatch. Even Christine is always Rachel McAdams. Although, I suppose, to be fair, not one Marvel movie ago, there was a Peter Parker played by 3 different people. Spoilers for Spider-Man. That being said, the actual reports that have come out since the movie is that there's not a real clear answer here as to whether or not John Krasinski will have a future in the MCU. We do know that the writer of Multiverse of Madness worked very closely with John Krasinski in order to bring the role of Reed Richards to life. So on the whole, this information just isn't currently known. But I'll tell you what, if it's not my boy Jim, I'm gonna be upset. Unless they go with Rainn Wilson, because I will be the first to admit that that would be straight up hilarious.
Identity theft is not a joke, Jim. Michael!
Anyway, though, back to other Wanda, who is now probably wanted for the murder of the entire Illuminati and the mental imprisonment of an entire town. What exactly is she to do in this circumstance? Because if the Hex goes, then so does her boys. And if I know anything about Wandas, it's that they will do literally anything for their children. Like, I don't know, maybe send them to another universe where she knows there's a Wanda that already loves them. Which then brings about a very important question. If the Hex disappears in other Wanda's universe, and the boys aren't in that universe, do they disappear? Because, as a reminder again, Billy and Tommy were never real. But make no mistake, they are real characters in the comics, known as Speed and Wiccan. And not for nothing, but at this point in time, it feels like the MCU has spent quite a bit of time setting them up, as well as what also feels like just a legion of other, like, young version Avengers. So, here is what I think is happening. I believe that the Billy and Tommy that we saw in the Multiverse of Madness are the creations of Wanda inside of a Hex inside of her universe. And that those boys will go away the moment that that Hex is undone. But if they find a way to have them exit that universe entirely, I think that there's a chance that they would be able to survive outside of it. This would mean that the boys are creations of Wanda who are now capable of existing somewhere else inside of the MCU, such as our 616 universe. If that ends up being the case, then if we dive deep into the lore of the children of Nexus beings, here's what we find. Nexus beings also have the potential to produce unbelievably powerful offspring. As it was mentioned that any born of the Scarlet Witch, Nexus being of reality 616, would be powerful enough to stand among the great forces of their universe and rock the cosmos itself. With that information in mind and where it seems like the MCU might be going a la Eternals, it might be handy to have someone of this magnitude of power around. This, of course, also then brings us to the last question, which is at the end of Multiverse of Madness, we literally see Wanda basically pick up an entire castle and then drop it on herself. It's hard to imagine anything powerful enough to destroy Wanda, but the Castle of the Darkhold does feel like it would be in the top 3 options capable of doing so. And yet, it's the MCU. And if Billy and Tommy are going to be existing out there somewhere, something tells me we haven't seen the end of Wanda. There you go, guys. There is still plenty to unpack from this movie. For my question of the day, what are your other unanswered questions from Multiverse of Madness? Be sure to let us know in the towel section down below. Also, guys, I wanted to let you know that there is an opportunity to see us live if you would like to. Next week on Thursday, May 19th, we are going to be in Orlando, Florida, doing a live version in person of Jay and I's trivia show. We are going to be there with a very normal podcast tour brought to you by Rooster Teeth and performing alongside the podcast annual pass. The event is going to be Thursday, May 19th at the Vanguard in Orlando, Florida. If you would like to check out tickets, they are in the description down below. Otherwise, if you haven't already, be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you'd like to see our complete spoiler review of Multiverse of Madness, you can do so right over here. Otherwise, until next time, bye!